This is the CBD of Adelaide, and in 1856 the first railway line in the suburbs of Adelaide was built at Port Dock Railway Station, and a year later the North Line was built as a broad gauge out to Smithville, and later the line was extended to Gawler. This North Line, or what's now called the Gawler Line, is the most popular railway line in Adelaide. There is very little public information about the number of patrons that use Adelaide public transport, but one document was released in 2015 on a website by the DPTI which showed that Adelaide Metro carried 66 million patrons in 2015, of which 13 million were on train lines, and figures for 2017 show that the Gawler line had a weekday patronage of 17,000 passengers per day, which comes to about 4.5 million passengers are using the Gawler line. The Gawler line runs for a distance of 42 kilometres from Gawler and 18 kilometres from Salisbury to the city, and trains, which are express trains from Gawler Central, can achieve a speed of 48 kilometres per hour for the trip, and the Salisbury one gets 49 kilometres per hour, and the all station trains go at 42 kilometres an hour or 38 kilometres an hour. If you look at the number of cars that are available during rush hours, we'll see that on a weekday between 8 and 9, 8 trains are able to come into Adelaide Railway Station. And interestingly, in these various patterns of stopping, there are only 4 stations where all the trains always stop. One of the major enhancements that has occurred on the Gawler line after the success of the bus integration on the Seaford line is the integration of the buses in suburbs into the railway station. The yellow line has been highlighted, which is the railway line. This line, in fact, is currently not used. It's the broad gauge line to Roseworthy and beyond, and the station, which is now called Gawler Central, there's another railway line which runs into the Barossa Valley, which is also broad gauge. An interesting feature at Gawler is they've now got a feature called On Demand, which means that people living out here can ring up and dial a bus, and as long as they don't live within 500 metres of a bus route, then they're able to have a bus come and pick them up and take them to the station, or alternatively from the station get delivered to places like the University of Adelaide's campus at Roseworthy. Train pulling into Gawler Railway Station, and you see the bus interchange outside Gawler Railway Station. A steam train which used to run on this line, and actually was manufactured here in Gawler. Gawler was, in earlier times, a scene of much industry, including construction of locomotives, trains. This is train 245. Train at the Gawler Railway Station. and the bus stop, which services the Gawler Rail Station. Gawler Railway Station. Now I'm going to catch the train on platform 1. I need to walk across here. There's no underpasses for passengers. And a person on a wheelchair is just going to try and also catch the same train. Correction, the person's actually crossing over to the other side of the railway lines. Leaving platform 2 at Gawler. There are 3 platforms at Gawler Railway Station.
Welcome aboard. This is a train service to Adelaide. The next stop is Tamborine.
There are switches. At this point, all up and down trains currently use this left-hand side track during normal services. The area between Smithville Station and Gawler Station. This is Smithville Railway Station, which is called a Smithville Interchange. And this is the Monopara Centre Interchange. And one of the problems in Adelaide is the word interchange has interchangeable meanings. Sometimes it means buses and trains. I'm using here the English symbol for a train, whereas other times it just means buses and buses. So it's a bit confusing for people to know what they can do in terms of using the railway system, particularly when the bus routes don't clearly show the railway line. I've actually highlighted it here. With a sister city of Perth in Western Australia, this is the map showing the freight roads and freight railways in around Perth, and this is central CBD Perth, and there's a rubber line which is called the Northern Suburb Line in times past to Joondalup, and then just beyond that to a place called Butler, the Joondalup line. The Joondalup line in 2015 carried 17 million people, whereas the Gawler line is 42 kilometres. The Joondalup line carried 17 million people in a year. They're able to do this because they run more trains in the rush periods, and also the trains have more carriages on them, 6 carriages, so that in the rush period there are 72 cars being used to carry passengers, whereas in Adelaide it's 14 cars. The Northern Suburbs line, we now call it the Joondalup line, with 13 stations, they redirected the buses so that they all went into the railway stations rather than being radial out from central Perth. And the way that they did this was by using the bridge overpass was also a bus stop. So this means that one structure has the purpose of carrying through traffic in both directions over the railway line. It means that passengers can get off the train and get a lift up to the roadway above and catch the bus, or the reverse. So by using the road overpass for more than one purpose, they've been able to save money, and that way eliminate all of the problems of cars and traffic interfering with the movement of trains, and the reverse with trains interfering with the movement of cars. The other thing they did also was that the railway line, this is actually the line to Mandurah, which has got the similar pattern of design to the Joondalup line, the northern suburbs line. So the Joondalup line is able to carry so many passengers because of two things: high frequency, in other words the trains run at 5-minute intervals instead of 15-minute intervals, and higher capacity trains, 6 carriage trains, which are 3 times bigger than the trains which are normally used on the Gawler line. The distances are basically the same distance, around about 40 kilometres. I would suggest that the redevelopment of the Joondalup line is an example of what could be done on the Gawler line. The timetable for the Gawler line shows stations which are high frequency stations, but they are not places where buses necessarily go. Islington Station, which is a station where nearly all trains stop, is in the middle of an industrial area, and it's extremely difficult to park a car there, and very difficult for people to walk around to the station, and there are no buses which go anywhere near that particular railway station, even though the road bridge alongside it has been used as a way to get buses to Arndale into the city and avoid the problems of the level crossing at Ovingham. So this diagram should be modified to indicate where the buses actually interface. A good example of what's been successful is the Smithville Interchange and the Elizabeth Interchange, and the disaster of the Salisbury Interchange, where there are no underpasses or overpasses, and if you're trying to get from a bus to the train from Salisbury to Gawler, you have to cross over railway lines, and if you're coming from as a pedestrian, and if you're trying to go from Salisbury High School as an example, you have to cross over the ARTC freight train line as well as the other lines to get a bus. There used to be level underpasses, but these got filled in and not functioning, and nothing basically been done at Salisbury Interchange to improve the experience for passengers. There's no attempt being made to do a road overpass similar to what has been done on the Western Australian railway system. On the right hand side is the Australian Rail Track Corporation standard gauge line. We can see 2 locomotive on the freight train crossing the Para River, and the power lines going to Port Adelaide and from Port Adelaide and the Salisbury Highway.
Now arriving at Salisbury, then express to Parafield. Alight here for local bus services.
As we pull into this station, the freight train will go past us. We're now going to be express, so we might be able to catch up to this freight train. That's the last of the freight train. Caught up to the freight train. And the down train on the metro system. So all three tracks are being used. We're now catching up to the freight train. Up to the locomotives on the freight train. Now overtaken the freight train.
Now arriving at Parafield. Please mind the gap.
At this point, the freight train will overtake us. Hurstville Station. We wait now for the freight train to catch up to us. The CBD of Adelaide. This is King William Street, Victoria Square, and this is what is now a tram line, and this shows what was there originally, and this actually is the South Terrace Railway Company when its trains terminated at Victoria Square, and this picture is basically taken close to where there currently is a fountain in Victoria Square, and shows the last of the steam trains just prior to the time when they changed it from a steam train to electric tram with dual tracks and a change of gauge. Quite a complicated change was needed to get the steam trains out of the streets of Adelaide. King William Street also was the main route for tram lines, and this photograph shows King William Street standing at Hindley Street corner, which is basically this point here, looking south, and you see the town hall here, and this TG building still exists. It's now an apartment building, instead of an office building. In the 1950s, which is later than this photograph, a similar number of trams were running up and down King William Street. So in the 1940s and early 50s, very few people had motor cars, and the average number of trips that Adelaide people did was 300 trips per person, which, if translated to today's population, 1 million people, would be 300 million trips by people in Adelaide. People at this time didn't own many motor cars, and most of them had to use public transport. Adelaide and the Gawler Rail Line. If we look at the morning schedule, between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock, 8 trains are scheduled to arrive in Adelaide, which is getting close to the limit. The limit would be 12 trains per minute. And if we wish to increase capacity, a slight increase in the number of trains would be possible, but beyond that, the alternatives are to make the trains longer or to increase the number of tracks. If we look at a similar railway line in New York City, the 8th Avenue trains, this is 8th Avenue in Manhattan, and they're named after that section of the track near Central Park. The distance from 168th Street to Euclid Avenue is 31 kilometres. If we compare that to Gawler at 40 kilometres, we can see that much of New York City could sit into this area of northern Adelaide. The 8th Avenue Express each day carries 600,000 passengers per day. So the question is, how does a pair of rails, or in this case 2 pairs of rails, carry so many people? And the trick is they actually are running 2 trains with 2 different schedules. The A train during rush periods is an express train. It runs for a total of 66 stops if it stopped at all stations, but in the rush period the number of stations is reduced, so that during rush periods the train can go at up to 35 kilometres per hour to get from one end of the line to the other. And then during rush periods they schedule on another set of tracks a train called a C train, which is a local train, and if it stopped at all stops it would be 40 stops and achieves a speed of 28 kilometres. This shows the A train from Washington Heights on Manhattan Island down through 8th Avenue, and at this point we are at 8th Avenue changes its name to Park Avenue West, and here is Columbus Circle, and the full colour means that all trains stop at Columbus Circle, which is at the southwest corner of Central Park, and there's also the location of the Trump Tower, which is now rather famous. Continues down through and crosses under the river and goes in above. At this point the track is 2 tracks. Here it is 4 tracks under the river, then into Brookland, and then into Queens. And at this point the A train is 3 tracks, so that you've got an arrangement where in the morning the 3rd track can be used for express trains as up trains, and in the evening the 3rd track can be used as express trains on the down trains. So between Euclid and 168th Street we have the C train local, and the yellow is showing the section alongside Central Park in Manhattan. So the issue is that if you're travelling in rush periods from Queens Borough or Brooklyn, Manhattan, so Queens or Brooklyn, you may have to change trains to get to a local station. So you've got basically 2 patterns on the system, an A and a C. This is the A train leaving Euclid, and we can see that in the period in the morning from 7 till 8 there are 13 trains on the track with headways of 3 or 4 minutes between trains, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 trains are running that service, and on the local train tracks between 7 and 8 evening Euclid there are 7 trains identified, and at 8 o'clock there'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 trains, and these trains all have 10 carriages. 15 trains with 10 carriages cars is 150 cars, and the C train with 11 trains, 10 cars, 110 cars, so 260 cars are needed to be able to carry the ridership of 600,000 people per day. This is the track diagram for the Metropolitan Transport Authority trains, the so-called subway, in Queens and Brooklyn. In this section of New York City, these trains are actually running above ground, and in Brooklyn there's only one short line which is actually underground, the rest are all above ground. So this is the A train, and this is the terminus of the C train at Euclid Avenue, and we can see here that through this section there are 3 tracks on the A train, so that it can run its own express line through the middle during rush periods. So in the morning trains will be going up on the 3rd track, and in the evening they'll be going down on the 3rd track. At this point the number of tracks used increases to 4, and we can see that Euclid Avenue there are 4 platforms and 4 tracks. At the next station there are 4 tracks but only 2 platforms, so the A train doesn't stop there because it's running through the centre. Here, the next station, there are 4 tracks and 2 stations, and so on, until we get to this point where we can see there's quite a lot of other train lines coming in, and so this becomes an interchange point between all these different railway lines. And at this point the A and the C trains will stop. There are 4 tracks and 4 platforms, and the next station and so on, the number of tracks remains 4, but there are only 2 platforms. So the A train doesn't stop at these stations. It can go at higher speed between stations. This is an A train at Rockaway Boulevard, where there are 3 tracks, and we see that the express train is going through the 3rd track, and we can also see that there are 10 carriages. And the other interesting feature is the flying junction, which the A train is now about to go into. You can also see that this is an elevated track. The advantage of the 3rd track is that if something needs to be repaired on the main tracks, the 3rd track can also be used as a way that services can continue on a very busy railway line. The 3rd track is very useful. Now disappearing under the flying junction. Passing loops at railway stations are not a new idea. This shows the Hurstville Station on the Illawarra line in New South Wales, where we can see there are 2 platforms with the pedestrian overpass, but more importantly we can see that the track in the centre here is for express trains to go through, whilst the local trains are at the platform. So it means that express trains can pass local trains at stations without having to spend money on tracks on the whole length of the line. So in summary, once a railway line becomes saturated, and it becomes saturated when the number of trains per hour reaches 12 trains per hour, the only solutions available then are to increase the length of the trains. Currently this line carries 2 and 3 car trains. If this was electrified, the number of cars would be 6 if they have 2 electric trains joined together, as they did in Perth. The Joondalup line, or the Northern Suburbs line in Perth, at the current moment is probably reached saturation point, and their solution would be to increase the platforms longer to 9 car length platforms. In Adelaide at the moment we haven't embraced the idea of high capacity trains along this railway line, but to do so means that all of the stations would have to be changed to accommodate the high capacity trains, and the logical next step is 6 carriage trains. And as we've seen in New York City, they extended all of their platforms to 10 carriage trains. And then because of the population, most people in New York City, in terms of the boroughs, Brooklyn has the highest number of people living. Manhattan is smaller and has a smaller population. What they've done there is increase the number of tracks, so that in fact there are two up tracks and 2 down tracks. At some point in the future, this section through here would need to be duplicated, so there'd be 4 tracks, or alternatively a new railway line could be brought by taking at the point here, which is the Dry Creek Junction, you could take the railway lines under the road and then underneath Prospect Road and then through North Adelaide underneath O'Connell Street and join up with the Seaford line, so that you would actually duplicate the number of tracks by running a separate line. Doing nothing means that we will have a situation where people will be turned off public transport because they can't get onto the trains.